They're assuming that they can replace 500,000 jobs. If you have the biggest employer in the world basically saying, hey, we're going to try to not employ people, that's a pretty profound shift. If we don't create alternatives and like social safety nets, there are just potentially a lot of jobs that aren't going to exist anymore. Did you see the Amazon piece that ran in the New York Times?
No, I missed it.
So some internal documents at Amazon were uncovered.
Chris Bolman is a sustainability entrepreneur and founder of Brightest, a B Corp using technology and strategy to help organizations build a more sustainable, resilient future.
A lot of what we're trying to do is help our clients do things better and more impactfully. Your dollar is definitely your vote, and we've seen that a lot recently. A lot of organizations do put on a good face and hide the dirt out back.
Can you talk a little bit about how your team uses Brightest internally to track some of those metrics?
We use it to track and calculate like all of our
Hi, Chris. Thank you so much for being here. To all of our listeners, welcome to the Purpose Profit Shift, where real stories about bold shifts illuminate how we can create a new economy. I'm your host, Rachel Bernier Green, social entrepreneur, activist, and founder of EJ Consortium, a finance and operations consulting firm designed to help purposeful businesses change the world. Today's guest is Chris Bolman, founder and CEO of Brightest, a certified B Corp on a mission to democratize sustainability. After spending years in high-growth tech startups, including as VP of Marketing at Sequoia-Backed Percolate, Chris made a radical choice: to build systems that change the system. And that was one of my favorite quotes of yours that I found as I was preparing for this. And Brightest is now a global leader in the ESG and sustainability software, serving hundreds of organizations from scrappy startups to established enterprises. Chris believes that measuring impact shouldn't cost millions or require an army of consultants, and he's proving it. If you've ever wondered how to scale purpose without losing profit, or how to make a values-driven business accessible to everyone, this is the conversation for you. Welcome to the Purpose Profit Shift, Chris.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's great to be here. Appreciate you having me.
Thank you. I am so excited about this conversation. If you talk to anybody on my team, they will tell you that impact measurement is my jam, and we have moved heaven and earth to figure out ways to measure impact for our clients. And so coming across your platform, it was really exciting to see the work that you've done. And as I was preparing for today, I saw an interview where you said that you've started Brightest because you were frustrated but optimistic. So can you take us back to that moment, what you were seeing in the world or in yourself that made you realize that something had to change?
Yeah, so I think there were probably a couple different like pivotal points in my life, but I do think in general the kind of 2015 to 2017 period was, I think, really important in terms of just various different things that I was sort of seeing in my own personal life and my personal experience, things going on in the world. If you'll remember, 2016 was kind of the first time that we did this.
Yes.
Yeah, I think, it's funny because I remember like being in New York City, which is obviously like, again, a very kind of diverse and eclectic place. And, there's millions of people there. There's so many different organizations doing good things. There's like environmental justice, social justice, nonprofits, activism. Like it's a very, very vibrant ecosystem for that. But I remember just going through like a basic kind of company volunteering exercise of just
Mhm.
trying to get some of me and my colleagues find volunteer opportunities as a team. And it turned out to be kind of surprisingly hard. Like
Yeah.
you have to spend money or you have to have a corporate partnership or you need to schedule something really far in advance. And, we went and we did like a kind of a cleanup of a park in Brooklyn. And then we went to another sort of nonprofit and we did some like meal kind of prep and things for people who, were food insecure. And it was so like difficult and administrative and challenging to find those things as like an organization for not that many people when I went through the like process of thinking about, okay, like if I were going to do this myself, or like if my friends wanted to do something, or I just like found some extra time on the weekend and I wanted to give back, like how do I do that? Like if you
Yeah.
basically just pose the simple question of like, I'm Chris or I'm Rachel, I live here, I care about X, Y, and Z, like what can I do? It's like kind of surprisingly hard to get answers to that question or to get plugged in unless again you already have kind of an existing network. So, I was thinking about some of those kind of considerations. Again, we kind of all know what happened in US politics in 2016. And then also at the same time, I think we were kind of starting to see the early impacts of climate change, or again, and obviously that takes a lot of form, right? You see it in like air pollution, which is a public health issue in a lot of like major cities, but also, wildfires,
Yeah.
heat waves, and other things. And some of the early like climate activism, like Sunrise Movement and like Greta Thunberg, were also kind of getting going in that like 2017, 2018 space. So I think for me, as someone who, again, had a lot of experience in like technology and was trying to think about these different things, the question that I kept asking myself was like, okay, we have things like Airbnb where I can just like really easily book a place to stay, or we have Uber where I can like call up and I can get a taxi. Like, is there a way to use technology in a way to like help people help others, or like help organizations find what they need? Or just like connect resources better. And so
Love that.
those were kind of the initial like questions and experiences that led to Brightest. It's obviously been a journey. We've gone through some changes and some evolutions, but that was kind of the initial starting point of just saying, I think prior to then, I had kind of naively felt like progress was kind of winning and we were like linearly moving in a positive direction as a society. And I just saw too many things again over that like 2015, 2016, 2017 period where I was like,
Yeah.
I don't think progress is winning, to be honest. And like, it's definitely not going to be, moving in a good direction if more people don't get involved and more people don't do things. So that was kind of the
Absolutely.
starting impetus or catalyst for it.
I absolutely love that. When I love when people don't just encounter a problem and then they just remain in that state of frustration, but they start ideating around like what would better look like, and then start putting the pieces in place. So before we dig into more on Brightest, I want to. Before founding Brightest, you were VP of marketing at Percolate, a Sequoia Capital backed company. So by conventional standards, for a lot of entrepreneurs, that would be like thinking, hey, I made it. So, what was missing and what made you say, okay, I'm in this great environment. Now I'm going to pivot and actually put my energy into building that platform as you kind of had those ideas percolating back in the 2015 to 2017 period?
Yeah, so I mean, stepping back even a little bit more, I've definitely always been interested in like the environment and in sustainability. Like I've always just like loved the outdoors. Like I enjoy hiking. I like being in nature. I actually had an opportunity kind of early on in my career to work at a solar energy company, which did consulting and also worked on project development. And so I got kind of exposed to like renewable energy and
Okay.
electrification of transportation and storage. And I actually thought maybe that I would go in the direction of kind of working on solar projects, which again I think is very noble and very important work. But I think there were some kind of life circumstances, and it maybe just wasn't necessarily the right thing for me personally or the right thing in my life at the time. And so because I had some opportunities on the tech side, more on the software side, ended up kind of going in that direction, and that led me to Percolate. And I think
Okay.
Percolate was a great experience. Like, it was a phenomenal team. Like some of, my favorite people, friends, still to this day came out of that experience. And, I learned a lot about again kind of what like an elite kind of venture-backed tech startup, like how it works, what the demands are, what the expectations and the pressures are. But, by again 2015, 2016, 2017, um, I felt in a lot of ways that we were supporting, and most of our clients are like the biggest companies in the world. And again, that obviously like makes sense from an economic standpoint. Like those are the companies with the most
Right.
money, those are the companies with the most resources. So like it's a very good market to have as a business. But at the end of the day, like that's not necessarily always like trickling or funneling down to, again, smaller organizations or entrepreneurs. And, I do think there's a lot of potential in like corporate social responsibility and corporate philanthropy. So a lot of big companies do actually have like philanthropic arms and works who are doing really positive things. They're making grants or they're putting money into the community. And obviously just through like hiring and creating jobs, you're also creating economic benefit. So this isn't like a tirade against like big companies, but there's definitely, more work that needs to be done again in a lot of different kind of communities and spaces and segments of the economy that I just felt like wasn't really happening. And also, those big organizations are typically the ones who need to do the most in terms of, again, sustainability or, diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? Because they are the biggest employers, they are the biggest resource users. So, in some ways, like it is actually good to start big because you get scale. But I just didn't feel like I had like a direct opportunity to work with those organizations in those arenas. And so that's
Yeah.
ultimately also led me to really want to start Brightest. Like in some ways, I think Percolate was an inspiration for me. It was like, okay, what would a Percolate for sustainability or a Percolate for social impact or corporate philanthropy look like? And again, those were some of the kind of early things that I was asking myself.
Awesome. So, kind of piggybacking on that, and one of your personal tagline, or at least that's what I call it, that I saw in your as I was prepping, is that you are building systems to change the system, and so that is powerful, also extraordinarily difficult. So, can you walk us through what that actually means in practice in terms of what systems were broken? And you've kind of alluded to it as you've talked about some of the ideas that were in your mind as you were forming Brightest. And what did you actually have to build, and kind of how Brightest looks in its current iteration with what you have built?
Yeah. So obviously, like systems are very important in society. And, we can talk about systems in a lot of different ways, right? Like, we have the criminal justice system, but we also have like software or operating
Right.
systems, and they're all systems. So, I think the most important thing is that, systems create kind of boundaries and structures and incentives that we
Right.
we work in. Like capitalism is a system or democracy is a system.
Exactly.
Like all of these various like things kind of dictate like the rules and the values and the operating principles around like how we go about our day to day. And I think the powerful thing about, again, in particular, like technology, which can be a double-edged sword or it can be kind of a blessing or a curse, is that like technology scales very, very quickly. If
Yeah.
you think about like what can TikTok do for culture, for example, or like going viral on social media, like that can have immense changes in like the cultural conversation that we're happening within days or weeks
Right.
like that. We saw that with like, the Jimmy Fallon controversy recently. Like there's so
Mhm.
many examples of that. And so I think the question for me was like, if the benefits of technology are like speed and scale and efficiency and all of these things, how can you try to take that and like apply it to, again, some of these bigger systems? And I think in some ways, like, again, maybe I was just like naive or naively optimistic because like it's not easy to change a system. In fact, it's like incredibly, incredibly hard to change any system,
Right.
like let alone like many systems. And obviously, the bigger the system, the more inertia and friction there is around that. But again, I've always been one to say, "Hey, why not try?" And kind of, yeah, that was the starting point there.
Awesome. So most ESG platforms target Fortune 500 companies, like you said, because they have those $1 million budgets. But you chose to intentionally democratize access and build something that would be accessible with price points starting. That this is something that startups and mid-sized companies and even nonprofits can utilize. So, can you talk a little bit about why you made that choice and what some of the obstacles that you faced were when you decided to make that direction versus going after the whales that conventional wisdom tells us is where you should start?
Yeah, definitely. So I think for anyone who's less familiar, and I know it's been a little politicized recently, but like ESG basically stands for like environmental, social, and governance. So we're thinking about like environmental impacts, social impacts. And again, this can relate to like workforce or the community or social impact. And then governance typically, gets into like accountability and risk and transparency and other areas like maybe how things are structured or how decisions get made. So,
Thank you for adding that context. I
my
appreciate
yeah,
that.
yeah, for sure. My like overall thought process was trying to make something as inclusive as possible. And I really wanted from the start to create something that, pretty much any organization could bring on and use. And like again, we've gone through different iterations of Brightest, but like, we were very focused early on nonprofits and smaller organizations. We actually have supported or worked with like political campaigns, although we're not doing as much of that anymore. But like early on, we were actually doing a fair bit of like political work. We obviously support, yeah, companies, universities, government agencies. So pretty much everyone. And I think, again, that kind of accessibility and making it something that obviously like a really large company could use and could get value out of, but
Mhm.
it's kind of nimble and easy to use enough for anyone and kind of again has like a price point that can scale. That was like pretty important to me. I will say, obviously, you have to like understand the market. And so, like, let's say you're
Yeah.
charging $20 a month for something, or you're getting $5 a month. You obviously need a lot more customers. Like that works really well for Netflix because they're huge. But if you're getting $20 a month and you have like 50 customers, you don't really have a business.
Not going to
Yeah,
work.
yeah, it's not really gonna go anywhere. So I think there's like a portfolio type of strategy that we've adopted there where like we do have larger customers and obviously we have less of them because there's less of them, but we also try to support other organizations. And I think, it's challenging in the nonprofit space and in like the
Yeah.
community space in general because these are typically organizations where they're running pretty lean to begin with. Like they don't
Right.
necessarily have big teams. They may not have technology expertise. They also may not have a lot of budget. Like they're kind of focused on like programs and servicing their constituency. So that has been a challenge. But again, we've just tried to meet organizations where they are, or offer kind of discounts for like impact oriented organizations or offer discounts for B Corps. And generally for the most part, we've been able to make it work.
So let's dig into that a little bit more because I think that's something at our company. We only work with companies who have some broader mission. So they're trying to track something else in their company, whether it's an environmental or a social impact that they are trying to do. And they don't exist solely for the maximization of profit. And one of the things that we run into a lot is people figuring out how they can price something for social good without undervaluing their work. And so you talked a little bit about how you guys are taking the portfolio approach. Can you tell me a little bit more about what your thought process was as you were developing the pricing for like your different tiers of service to try to balance the profit and purpose there?
Yeah. So there's definitely different ways to go about this, but I think the way that has been most constructive for me is, it helps to try to set a target, even if it's like an unreachable target. But let's say, your goal is like $100,000 in revenue or something that you want to like achieve as a business. So again, going through kind of the basic math exercise of like, how do I get there, right? So
Yeah.
if I can get $1,000 from 100 clients, then I can get there. If I can get 10,000 from 10 clients, I can get there, and you kind of break it down that way in terms of your unit economics. And what I spent a lot of time doing, I mean, honestly, probably like 2 years in the early days, was really just like meeting with organizations and trying to do discovery and also just trying to like be pretty transparent of, we're a startup, this is a newer offering. We're still trying to really like iterate and kind of find the right market for it. Like, how much would you spend on this? Or like what does seem like a fair price? And, I mean, I've talked to hundreds, if not thousands of people at this point, but you start to kind of get these like price points and willingness to pay and these data points. And then you say, okay, I can start to sell it to this segment for this much, and I can start to sell it to that segment for that much. And I think in general, as like an entrepreneur or anyone who's like got a newer or a new product, if you can, to the extent like it's feasible, like start low, and like think about it in terms of like loss leader. or just trying to get customers or, whatever it is. Like, we would offer discounts if like someone did a case study, or sometimes we'd say like, hey, free trial or like do a pilot. You know, Early on, we were just trying to get essentially our foot in the door, get traction, get proof
Hmm.
points, and also get the feedback and the learnings of like how we would make it better.
That's crucial.
And then once you start getting that momentum, one, you should keep iterating and learning and making the product better, which may allow you to raise prices in the future, but also, you can kind of expand your market.
Yeah. I think that that is, I love that you highlighted that that was a multi-year process because I think a lot of times people want that to be a instant, figured it out, press a button. Now now I figured out the perfect balance. But you had to be really intentional there. And so one of the things that you mentioned in the interest of sharing context for some of our listeners who might not speak some of the jargon as you did earlier, you mentioned that you offered discounts to B Corp members. And I know that Brightest is a certified B Corp. And so for those who don't know, that's a rigorous third party verification that really looks at a business to see if they meet the very high standards of social and environmental performance. So, can you talk about why it was important for you to actually pursue B Corp certification for Brightest and what you learned through that process?
Yeah, I think some of it definitely came down to, I guess, for lack of a better word, like accountability or really like transparency. Because, it's fine for like me on a personal level to say, like, "Ah, I want to build a company that like does good or like tries to do good." But,
Right.
that's just like me saying it. Whereas I think if like a third party that is, very independent and credible looks at your organization and, gathers all your data and asks a bunch of questions and essentially kind of audits you, like, if they find it, I think it's a much better indication that you actually are sort of practicing what you preach. But
Absolutely.
I think there's a lot of brands out there, like other B Corps, who have really like taken a stance on important like environmental and social issues, like Patagonia being an example
Yes.
that, I think people know a lot. But, thinking about, like Patagonia is a great example of like a founder or an executive who's like built a very successful company and is like very focused on giving back. And like Patagonia, they're obviously again a very successful company, far more than us, but like they're not trying to profit maximize, like they're trying to strike a good balance and they're trying to influence and educate and do other things. Or like, Ben and Jerry's is like a good
Mhm.
example, and they're kind of going through a little bit of
A
a
rough spot
dialogue with
right now.
Unilever right now around exactly
Yes.
that thing, saying like, hey, you're not really like
Fighting in the
living
good
up to.
fight.
Yeah. So I like that, and I think I've always had like a little bit of that. Yeah, I don't know, fight or whatever in me as well. So that was definitely always the type of company that I wanted to build. And yeah, I mean, it's definitely easier said than done. Like again, I'm sure we've like missed out on potential revenue or growth opportunities by trying to stick to our principles, and that can be really hard. Like I
Yeah.
totally understand, different people's economic realities, and maybe that's not something that everyone is able to do. But I think for me, it's like, I want to try to have a good business, but like also sleep at night and feel like we're, contributing in positive ways.
Absolutely. So, can you tell me about what some of the metrics that Brightest that you all track that are actually important to you? So, what does that actually mean in practice? Some of the things that you choose to do differently because of your values.
Yeah, so we in a lot of ways are kind of a meta enabler of our clients. So a lot of what we're trying to do is help our clients do things better and more impactfully. But maybe I'll come back to that. So, as us as an organization, I mean, we're not a huge company, but we are like a globally distributed team. So we have team
Hmm.
at the US and in Europe and in other parts of the world. So I think the first thing that we look at a lot is just like what is our own environmental footprint and impact.
Okay.
Because we're a software company, it's not huge. Like we don't have a physical supply chain, we don't make products, but we do use servers and we do use energy or like a decent amount
Hmm.
of that. So we're obviously trying to make sure that like our servers and our data centers are as green as possible. They're energy efficient. They're running on renewable energy. So we want to kind of reduce our footprint. We try
That's
to
awesome.
travel as little as possible and use like Zoom and other remote tools so that we're not, creating travel emissions. Europe has really good train infrastructure, so most of the team in Europe, when they're traveling, they're using the train, which I think again is great. Obviously, in the U.S., we have a little work to do with the rail system, but it
Yeah.
it is what it is. So I think we care a lot about our environmental impact. We also obviously care a lot that everyone is like paid well. So everyone should make, above a living wage. Everyone should be fairly compensated. We shouldn't have like gender pay gaps. We shouldn't have any sort of like identity based or socioeconomic gaps. So, everyone should be treated fairly. I think actually in our company, like, yeah, the highest compensated person is a woman. So, those are the types of like policies and things that we have. And yeah, we do a lot with like policies, training, workforce development. We also do some volunteering. Actually, we had 3 members of our team who went out and did a beach cleanup today, which was cool, and picked up some trash and stuff. So there's definitely stuff that we're doing as a company. But again, if I think about like our size and our impact, like we do have clients that are multinational companies, and so they use way more energy and generate way more waste and employ far more people. So if we can help them like reduce their waste or reduce their energy usage or their environmental pollution, like we're achieving a much greater scale. So a lot of what we do pay attention to is like how much are we helping our clients save and
Yeah.
reduce, or how much are we like allowing them to have like a better like measurable impact. And one final thing I'll say, and then I'll stop talking. Um,
Oh, no,
I
I'm
do I do
drawn
think
into
like
all of this.
there's like an important kind of economic case to this as well, which is really interesting. Like, we have a healthcare client we were in a meeting with earlier this week, and the interesting thing that they were saying is like, we want to do a lot of this like sustainability stuff because it's the right thing, but it's also just like good for business. If we can
Yes.
like if we can go to a hospital and say, "Hey, like hospital system, you're going to produce less waste and that's also going to save you money, or you're going to use less plastic and that's going to save you money, or we're going to give you something that lasts longer and is more durable so you can treat more patients and like have an ultimate like long-term lower cost." Like those are great conversations to have because it's like you're getting the double bottom line win. It's like it's sustainable and it's good for business. And the more we can prove that out, the more organizations want to invest in sustainability because they're getting other benefits as well.
I absolutely love that because that is one of the biggest shifts I think that we need to make when we have conversations about doing the right thing. That doing the right thing often has tangible, positive impacts on your bottom line. And so a lot of times people get stuck in this kind of false dichotomy between I have to do either or, and it's like lot of the times that's not the case. So like we can really shift that narrative and lean into the areas that where there are those kind of huge win-wins, and that there's not really a trade-off. And making the trade-offs, those are more principled decisions that some people will choose to make, but a lot of people would do the right thing just for the bottom line impact. And if we share that part of the story more, I'll take their impact regardless of their intent.
Yeah, exactly. It's like make it impossible not to do good. It's like, hey, do you want the
Exactly.
cheaper option and the option that does good? And they're like, I want
Gotcha.
the cheaper option. Great, you did good anyway.
Right. Exactly. So, can you talk a little bit about how your team uses Brightest internally to track some of those metrics? Because I think people listening are going to be really interested in if they were to work with Brightest, what does that experience look like for them, and what are they able to track? How does it make it easier?
Yeah, so we put out our first actual like company sustainability report for 2024 last year, or rather at the start of this year, but we were kind of reporting on data for last year, and we're kind of working on our second sustainability report now. A lot of the data and a lot of the information that goes into that report is sort of organized and put together through the Brightest software platform. So we use it to track and calculate like all of our travel, all of our carbon emissions, where our emissions are coming from, what our energy usage is. what we're spending on different things like servers. So all of that information goes through Brightest. We use it for like surveys and for like environmental and social like data collection and just like
Okay.
get information from employees. So basically, everyone kind of in the organization is typically responsible for like uploading or importing or just like answering a few things. And then the system will kind of tabulate and calculate everything from there. And then we can
Okay.
kind of export out and ultimately like produce the information in the report. So we do use it for internal reporting. There's definitely stuff that like again we can't use that we've built for like very different types of companies. Like I would
Right.
love to use the supply chain module, but like we don't really have much of a
Doesn't
supply
make
chain.
sense
But
for your business, right?
there's like other things like that. But yeah, generally we do use the platform. Like our director of sustainability, she's kind of the power user as well as our operations lead. So the two of them are in the system, but pretty much I would say everyone inside the company uses Brightest in some way, shape, or form.
Okay. And does Brightest integrate with other platforms to pull in data, or how does data? Are people typically manually doing that? Can you talk a little bit about that process?
Yeah, we've been building out like an integration ecosystem. So we can connect to a lot of like HR, like human resources systems. So if people know like
Amazing.
ADP or Gusto or things like that, we can pull data from that. We can pull data from like accounting systems, like QuickBooks or like Oracle NetSuite. We're doing more actually with AI on the data collection side. So there's some
Okay.
cool kind of data collection things that we can do with AI. But yeah, we can get data from like a lot of different places. And I think historically, like if I look back like 1 to 2 years, data collection was very manual. And now data
Yes.
collection is getting a lot more automated. And I actually think in like a year or two, very little like human work will be required on the data collection side.
I am thrilled to hear that because that's one of the things that sometimes my clients struggle with is figuring out, okay, this is great, but are we creating more work that is not really value added work? Like that's not a job that anybody loves, is taking data from this silo and transferring it to this silo. So those are the areas where it definitely makes sense to rely on technology to leverage that so that we can spend more time doing the work instead of reporting on the work.
Yes, I think that's kind of an unfortunate reality in the industry, and I think anyone who's ever put together, like, a sustainability report or an impact report will know this, is those reports take a lot of, like,
So
collecting invoices and collecting spreads so much time, and yeah, it's like, that's a
figure
frustration
out
for
your
me is,
impact
like
framework and
yeah. It's like you spent 3 months making this report. Great. It's a great report and it's awesome to like tell that story and like that's an important narrative piece, but like think about what you could have done with that time.
yes, exactly. Your time, yeah, the opportunity cost is very real when it comes to compiling those reports. So I have so many questions for you, but let's start with this one. So looking ahead, and you just talked about this kind of one shift you see coming, but what's the next radical shift you see coming in the purpose-driven business space, and what should like-minded founders be preparing for right now?
I mean, I do think everyone needs to take AI pretty seriously.
Yeah,
It's one of those situations where like Pandora's box is open and AI will have
exactly.
benefits and negatives for society, but it's just such a powerful tool and such like a fundamental change in terms of technology that I think it's really, or at least if you are not using it right now, unless you're sort of not using it on like specific moral or like ethical grounds, it's
Mhm.
very worth spending time, you know, just try out, ChatGPT, experiment with like Claude or Google Gemini. I think the more you just try it and try to use it and test it out, like the more potentially like ideas will come and, using it for research or using it for workflows or automations. I think that's a really important opportunity. And I've actually just very recently seen kind of more announcements. In fact, actually, there was like a very specific one that I'm going to forget the name on, so I'm going to mess it up. But a lot of the big foundations, like a Midyar and I think Rockefeller and a lot of these different ones, they're all just now like the Gates Foundation launching like new AI initiatives or trying to figure out how to use AI in the impact space for again, impact measurement and automation. So
Mhm.
I think whether you're a company or a nonprofit or an entrepreneur, I think AI is just really, really important because it does unlock a lot of these possibilities. And again, should, when used smartly, give you back time to make you more productive or allow some things to happen faster. So I think that's a really big trend. And then yeah, I think we're kind of hopefully, again, I'll sort of hedge or maybe knock on wood on that one, but I think we're hopefully kind of moving into this phase in the world or in a lot of society where, again, it's not like impact isn't seen as this separate thing. Like it's not one person's
Yes.
job, it's like side hobby, or like sustainability isn't like one person's job in some
Right.
satellite department. It's just kind of getting integrated into everything. And like we should
Mhm.
think about the environmental and the social consequences of decisions or investments. I'm seeing more and more of that happening, but again, I think there's some cultural differences in different parts of the world. There's some, certain areas I think are less key on that. But yeah, I think it's just it's hard for me to personally imagine, particularly in the business space, like, just not caring about externalities at all and just saying, like, "I'm gonna do what I'm doing. I'm gonna, like, wreck the environment or I'm gonna wreck communities, and I just don't care, and, like, no one can
Yeah.
hold me accountable." There are definitely, like, unfortunately, people in the world, and there's, like, who operate that way, but I think that that has to end. Like, I think
It
most people are
absolutely
really fed up
does.
with that way of operating.
Yeah, and think 100%. I think now more than ever, especially in America, that we're having this kind of burgeoning consciousness of, hey, wait a minute. This is how business is being done. This is what, how much power people have, and this is how they're choosing to use it. This is problematic. And so people who maybe this is not something that they normally are dealing with or thinking about are spending a lot more time in putting those connections together. So I definitely agree there. And I also love that you brought up AI because I actually think that for a lot of our clients that they would love to use a tool like Brightest in the future to, for example, see what's the environmental and social impact of their company utilizing AI because like for us we're thinking okay well we know some AI companies that they're putting building infrastructure in under-resourced neighborhoods and that there are impacts on those communities or there's impacts environmental impacts from the energy usage of the AI and so part of what we're thinking about is like you said Pandora's box is open the tools are there. We have to leverage them to remain competitive, but we also want to leverage them responsibly. And right now, we don't have any idea like how to track like what the impact of the AI tools that we're using is and how to choose one tool over another. And so I could definitely see that being something that more companies are trying to think through. Like, what does responsible use of AI look like, both from an environmental perspective? And then there's, so many other issues that will come to the forefront because we unfortunately have a lot of bad actors out there. But that does not mean that those of us who have these concerns to just swear off these tools altogether and then get left behind when the economy goes through a shift that we haven't seen since the beginning of the internet.
Yeah, I don't know. Did you see the Amazon piece that ran in the New York Times?
No, I missed it. What was it about?
So I think this just came out yesterday, but basically so some internal like documents at Amazon were uncovered. And again, Amazon is sort of like hedging and sort of backing away, but essentially they're assuming that they can replace 500,000 jobs
Oh, my
with
husband was
like
telling me about
robots
this.
and yeah, with like robots and AI and automation. And again, I think they're maybe the second largest employer in the US. Like I would imagine
Yeah,
it's like Amazon and Walmart are probably the two biggest. So, if you have the biggest employer in the world basically saying, "Hey, we're going to try to like not employ
yeah.
people or we're going to try to like significantly downsize jobs," like that's a pretty profound shift in just, like, the way the economy works that, again,
Right.
we haven't seen since, like, the start of the internet or, like, the Industrial
Industrial
Revolution,
Revolution. Yeah.
um, and, like, I would imagine, like, Amazon's not joking around, like, they're probably having these conversations because they think it's possible, and the technology is moving in a direction where that may well be possible. And so again, it's like if we don't create like systems and alternatives and like social safety nets, like there are just potentially a lot of jobs that aren't going to exist anymore. And so in that reality, where are we? Like where do we go? Like what are people doing?
Absolutely.
Like it's a really interesting question. Is there universal basic income? Like how does this work?
I mean, I think that, yeah, I think that UBI is going to be something that, for people who aren't familiar with that term, universal basic income is the idea that if our economy shifts to a way that so many jobs are automated that are replacing humans, that everyone in the country would get some type of monthly payment of income, that everyone gets basic income to cover their needs from the government, and then what they, if they are working, then that's above and beyond that kind of basic income. But if we do have a shift where, like you said, one of the world's largest employers decides to aggressively make that transition, and in full disclosure, Amazon has been on my hit list for years, because they are the king of making decisions that are full of negative externalities, and intentionally tanking entire industries and undercutting, like bookstores. They intentionally undercut prices so that they could force other businesses, small businesses, out of business. And then once they have a monopoly on those, and that goes back to the systems thinking we were talking about earlier, once they have a monopoly, then they can do whatever they want with prices, because you don't have any options anymore, because they push them out of business. And as a small business owner, for me, one of the ways our values show up is that we make conscious decisions that we don't spend money on Amazon unless you have looked everywhere else, and there has to be a very compelling reason that we would spend money on Amazon, or somebody self-published a book, and the only way we can support them and buy the book is by purchasing that way. But we have to be intentional with, even when we send out corporate gifts, where are we getting the shipping supplies from? Does that company, you know, align with our values, or are they actually actively advocating against everything that we stand for? And making those intentional decisions is one way I think that we can all step up. And one thing that people, might be tracking in a system like Brightest is their purchasing policies and how that's aligned with their values.
Yeah, your dollar is definitely, your vote, and, we've seen that a lot recently, like, Target is, like, another good example.
Yeah,
Uh, yeah, I think more and more people
more
are,
than Amazon for me.
uh yeah, I think more and more people are definitely, like, taking kind of their values into account and asking, "Is this a good company?" Do I wanna support them? But I think also it's hard, right? Because a lot of times, like, you don't know, and maybe some company is, like, doing, really good marketing, and they're sort of putting out, like, a good face, but then you don't
That's
necessarily know
pervasive.
what's going on behind the scene, and yeah, that's a common
Greenwashing.
problem, and I think a lot of organizations do put on a good face and kind of like,
Yeah,
hide the dirt out back. And, it's tough as a consumer, right? Like maybe you don't have like hours to research all this stuff.
exactly. Yeah, not easy by any means.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe someday we can get more into like independent assessments or things like that. I don't know. There are some already that exist, like kind of I guess you could say like again independent like ratings, and I think again that goes back to like the whole point of B Corp. Like I think generally like if
Exactly.
you're buying from a B Corp or you're doing business from a B Corp, you should be pretty confident that that organization has the right values, the right principles, the right labor standards. It can be helpful to like use those types of certifications in lieu of like making a quick decision.
Yeah. See, I love a full circle moment. Brought us right back to the B Corp conversation and the importance of it. And I think that this also will help as our listeners are out there making decisions, and they see the little B Corp logo on a package. Now if they didn't know before, now they know all of the things that kind of go along with being a B Corp. So, as we are wrapping up today, I would love to know kind of what is next for Brightest? What are you building forward? And more personally, what does success look like for Chris Bolman 5 years from now?
So I think success is kind of a moving target. But I think for
Absolutely.
me, It's interesting, right? Like, if I think about my younger self, particularly, I don't know, back like 10 years ago, I think I was so focused on like, man, I just wanna like make it to the top, like
Yeah.
I wanna rise like as high as I can in like the corporate hierarchy, I wanna get a good salary, like all of those things. And yeah, I think once you sort of get to a certain point where, you are successful enough, then I think you kinda start looking around and you're like, "Okay, what's next?" And, it's like, okay, you can either, like, take up golfing or tennis or just, like, get expensive hobbies, like, maybe you get a boat or whatever. But I think you can sort of look around and you're like, I need to do something else because, like, again, it's like if I'm playing the video game and I get to the last level, like I'm done, like what else is there to do in the game? And like is money actually like the best, point system in life? Like
Yeah.
it matters. It obviously matters a lot and it matters a ton if you don't have it. But like, once you kind of have enough, like again, probably not necessarily gonna make you that much happier. So, yeah, I think for me, like, on a personal level, yeah, trying to be more like intentional, trying to spend more time with like family and friends and like invest in personal relationships. Cause I do think, again, that is something I sacrificed a little bit. Like, I
Yeah.
used to just work a ton and it was like work comes first and like everything else comes second. And I think I've been kind of changing that or trying to get myself out of those habits.
Yeah.
And yeah, just thinking more about like personal sustainability, like health and happiness and like all those things. Like again, like I like very seriously burnt myself out 5, 6, 7 years ago where like I was exhausted and
Yeah.
just like taking more walks and like sleeping more and like just doing some like very basic stuff got me to be in like such a better place. So I think on a personal level, yeah, it's like if I have like, some degree of like health, happiness, balance, and I can make a living and keep kind of doing what I'm doing and feel like I'm making a positive contribution. I think that's good enough for me at this point. And yeah, in terms of like what's next for Brightest. So we're definitely going to keep doing more in terms of AI, as I mentioned. Like it's so powerful, and there's so many things that
Yeah.
we can use it for good and to help organizations make better decisions and find savings and find opportunities and optimize resources. So I think AI is big. We're going to hopefully continue to kind of expand more internationally. Like for the most part, we're servicing the US, Europe, the pretty kind of established areas, but like we would love to do more in like South America. We would love to do more in Asia. We'd love to do more in Africa. Like, we want to take this in a more global place and again support a more diverse array of organizations that again hopefully are going to represent kind of the future of the world and the global economy. And then yeah, just like really continuing to try to build good relationships with our customers, learn from them, understand their problems, understand their biggest pain points and how we can kind of creatively solve for them. Like that's where I think we like nerd out is where someone's like how can we like reduce the amount of waste that we're producing or how can we like improve this efficiency or like use less fuel or how can we like help make the better impact in this community or in this segment. Like we love those conversations and we love trying to like creative problem solve around them.
Oh, you're speaking my language. Those are, yeah. My team will actually probably listen to this and laugh because they're like, that's what Rachel would spend like all her time doing if she had a choice.
Well, again, it sounds like you've got a great North Star. So
Same. So this has been an absolutely incredible conversation with Chris Bolman. If you're a founder, executive, or a sustainability leader who wants to start measuring your impact, but you don't have $1 million budget, head to brightest.io to see how Brightest can help you get started. Chris and his team have built the platform that they wished existed. It is beautiful, accessible, and affordable. And if this episode resonated with you, I'd love for you to share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to the Purpose Profit Shift wherever you get your podcast and join us next time as we continue exploring what's possible when business becomes a force for justice, sustainability, and profit. Remember, the future of business isn't just about what you build, it's about who you become in the process and who you bring along with you. Until next time, keep shifting.